I took 100% ownership of my life, and things that I had been stuck on for years started shifting fast. Not by forcing or efforting, but by realizing that two teachers, a Navy SEAL and a mystic, were both saying the same thing about the power to create. Most people think that ownership is about who's responsible, but spiritual ownership is about reclaiming that life force to create. I'm going to share how this clicked for me, what manifested immediately afterwards, and how you can use it, especially if your life is feeling off track. Jocko Willink is a retired Navy SEAL commander who now teaches business leadership strategies to people. He's a famous author, podcaster, and he wrote a book called Extreme Ownership. And the principle is that if you want to be a successful and effective leader, you have to 100% own the entire outcome and results of anything that you lead. And he's got so many stories throughout his book why it's proven effective, but I'm just going to share one with you. He shared a story about 6 boat crews, and boat crew number 2 was winning all the time, whereas boat crew number 6 was losing all the time. And when they investigated, number 6 blamed it on his team and said that he was saddled with a team that wasn't good enough. They said, okay, switch teams. So they had the team who was losing, the leader, 6, move to number 2, and they had the leader from number 2 move to Team 6. And the new leader owned everything. He was already embodying that principle. The pace calls, crisp rolls with zero blame. He 100% owned whatever was happening in his team himself. The leader shifted the crew's state and the culture of the crew so that the crew also started 100% owning what was going on. And in the next race, Team 6, the one who had lost in the beginning all the races, won under the new leadership. So Jocko has so many examples of how that ownership is infectious. But really, if you look at Neville Goddard's principles, he's always talking about how we are the co-creators of our experience. And when we are not owning our experience, we are actually placing our power outside of us. And another Neville Goddard quote, "An assumption, if persisted, hardens into fact." If we assume that we are not the co-creators of our reality, then we will keep having experiences like that. Whereas if we own that we are co-creators, we can actually shift what happens. So team leader 6 believed that the power was out of his hands. He didn't have a good enough team, and that was what was created. Team leader number 2 believed that the power was in his hands, that he completely owned the outcome of everything, that he had choice in the matter. And from that place, his team also started adopting that they had the power in their hands as well. Jocko talks about how energetic states are infectious. So if you're going to have one, choose calm, choose power versus fear. So in the manifesting world, it's the same thing. We are energetic beings. When a person walks into the room, the first thing you notice is their energy. We're constantly feeling each other and impacting each other. So the most empowering thing to do to create is to choose our energetic state. And Jocko's book has chock full of so many examples. I just shared one of many examples. So here's a personal share from my life when that actually worked. I had a lot of trouble back in the day for decades making girlfriends. So I had a very challenging relationship with my mom, and I would see that showing up in a lot of my relationships with my girlfriends. Not all my girlfriends, but every like third or fourth one, I would meet someone who we would hit it off really well in the beginning, but then it would turn into this painful relationship where I had the same pattern story going on, that I was overgiving, that they were just talking more than they listened, that they were negative and creating a lot of drama. And then it would always result in this painful friendship breakup that I was left hurting with for months. And then inevitably it would keep happening over and over. Well, after studying manifestation and trauma work in Jocko Willink's book, I realized that, okay, if I spot it, I got it. The energy of what I am attracting must be within me. All manifestation principles, all the books teach that. Jocko Willink is saying 100% ownership. Like, how can you shift things? So I finally own it, which was really hard because I was so sure that I was so right about these friends just being sucky. And I start looking at myself and finding, okay, where is it within me? So I start getting IFS therapy sessions. I'm always talking about IFS because it's one of the most powerful trauma healing techniques that I have encountered, my favorite. And I start looking for where is that part in me, and sure enough, I find it, that I have a part of me that is negative and contentious and talking more than I listen. And I had been identified with the part of me that was at the effect of it because that's how it was in my relationship with my mom. And trauma nerdy fact, that we will constantly recreate the same kinds of energy dynamics that we have with our mom and dad with people in our lives. And like knowing that didn't make a difference because I was not doing the work. It was something I was intellectually knowing, but I wasn't actually doing the work until a few years ago. And after this one really painful friend breakup, I earnestly said, I do not want to go through this kind of pain. And I have the tools. I got to put my money where my mouth is, right? So I start doing the work. It is a tough pill to swallow. And I noticed there was also this self-judgment and shame around having the same energy as this kind of person who I had been judging for so many years as not being a good friend. And then so when I owned it and I really saw what was behind it, I was able to clear the energy. And in the last few years, I have not encountered a single new friend with that energy. My relationships have completely improved. And I started doing this with my client relationships, my romantic relationships, every relationship. If I spotted something that was triggering or activating, I was like, okay, spotted, I got it. And I owned it. And then these dynamics, either they stop bothering me or they just dissipate out of my life. The third story I have for you is about owning your narrative 100%. I was at brunch with a friend and I was sharing a story with him about an experiment on lucky narratives. So there was two groups of people. One group had a narrative that they were lucky. The other group had a narrative that they were not lucky. And they were both assigned to the same experiment. They had to read through this magazine and count how many pictures were in it. And if you turn the page, on the next page, there was a giant picture that said, there are 42 images in this magazine. You do not need to go any further and count. So all the people who had the lucky narrative saw that image, closed it and said 42. All the people who had the narrative that they were not lucky did not see that image, continued counting images, and a lot of them made mistakes in how many images there were. What we believe about ourselves, what narrative we have running, will influence what we can see in the world. We have parts of ourselves, and some parts will just not see when abundance is coming in, will not see situations and opportunities. It will only see things that feeds the narrative it currently has. So just like Neville Goddard says, an assumption, if persisted, hardens into fact. So as I'm sitting there, I'm telling my friend about this at lunch. He and I both decide, okay, we're going to change our narrative to be lucky. So we go for a walk after brunch and we walk into this really pretty gift shop that has like artwork and cards and candles and jewelry and stuff. As I go to the register, the store owner, who's really friendly and chatty, he says, you know, when you feel lucky on the inside, you attract all sorts of good fortune. And I was thinking to myself, wow, you're literally just talking about that. And then he hands me 2 free ladybug stickers, these cute little stickers, and says, ladybugs are for luck, here you go. I was like, whoa. I like look at my friend, I'm like, did you see what just happened? Then he asks both of us, what do you do for a living? And I say, I do emotional healing work. And I say, but my friend is a cat artist. And his wife in the back, who makes a lot of the jewelry and the candles, she goes, what? And she had overheard us and she said, can I see your artwork? And so he goes back there and shows her his Instagram because he's got like a big, cat art Instagram. And she says, this is amazing. Can we buy your art wholesale and sell it here? And he does that. So he said, sure, no problem. So we walk out of that store thinking like, wow, the universe does communicate with you all the time and it does match what you're sending. And my last story is a story about providence. Providence is what happens when you trust your intuitive whispers, how life provides when you stop forcing outcomes. So back in 2017, right before I turned 40, I had this realization that I was not owning the quality of my life. I was in a career that I didn't fully love, and so was my partner. We were both working so much overtime in this New York City hustle culture, living in a very expensive and small apartment in Brooklyn, and our health was being impacted. I had this feeling, I knew in my gut, if I didn't leave the industry that I was in, that I was going to get sick. And I said to my husband, we need to leave. We've always wanted to live abroad. We're not happy in the careers we have. I'm about to turn 40, and if I don't own and totally turn this ship around right now, the rest of my life is going to end up someplace I don't want it to be. So it's about ownership. And then commitment is the other key, right? There's ownership and then there's commitment, which is sustaining that ownership over time. I said to him, I'm going to go live abroad right now and I want you to come with me. And then he's like, Okay, I'm coming with you. So that September of 2017, we bought one-way tickets to Bali, imagining that we could live very frugally there and figure out what we're gonna do. We had about 8 months before we had to leave, and we had no idea how we were gonna make money. But then, even though we were terribly scared, we had committed. We had bought the tickets so we couldn't turn around. We had burned the boats behind us. I quit my job, and then he was gonna keep working until like 2 weeks before we were gonna leave. 1 month before we were about to leave, with no plans in mind, my partner had been looking around, connecting with different people, looking for online options, and my partner got an opportunity for a part-time online role in the aspect of his career that he'd always wanted to switch to, but couldn't because of the loss of income. But since we were moving to Bali, he could afford to take this part-time online contract position. So we had some income, and as soon as we went over to Bali, they told us that they needed us to be in the US time zone, which was fine. So we ended up living in Mexico instead for the next year. But 1 month after we got to Mexico, this training that I was in, the owner of the company invited me to be on the healing team. So that was the switch to my new career in emotional healing. All unexpected, never could have predicted it. It was incredible. And at first we started off making very little money, but then gradually as my practice grew and then as his role grew, he went on to have a full-time role in that new industry of product development that he'd always wanted to switch to. We moved to Colorado because we had more money. We rented a house that was probably 3 times the size of our tiny little Brooklyn apartment, and it cost way less money. We had gotten 2 dogs in Mexico. We had always wanted dogs, but in New York City, you have to pay, I think, like an extra couple $100 to have a dog, and it's already expensive. So we were living this really happy life with our daughter in this spacious home with these dogs, and then COVID hit. And we had been away from New York City for a year when it hit. And if we had stayed in New York City, we would have been cramped in this tiny little apartment there without pets. We were so happy, and we don't know if we wanted to leave then, if we could have found these opportunities. So we had left at the perfect time. We completely shifted our careers, and we're now living in this beautiful Colorado space that we love. And that is Providence. One of my favorite quotes by William H. Murray. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then Providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance which no man could have dreamt would have come his way. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it.